Hello and welcome to World Talks with me, Ashim Kumar. Tensions are rising in the South Caucasus as Armenia moves closer to the European Union, prompting a sharp reaction from Russia, which has recalled its ambassador. With elections approaching and regional security at stake, questions grow over Armenia's strategic direction and shifting alliances. To lay this out for us, we're joined by Wojciech Wojtasiewicz. He's an analyst at the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Welcome to TP World, and thank you very much for taking the time.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Good evening. So, how significant is Russia's withdrawal of an ambassador from Yerevan?
It shows the current atmosphere in Kremlin regarding the upcoming parliamentary elections in Armenia, and it shows that Vladimir Putin and the other Russian leaders are really irritated because of the shifting of the foreign policy of Armenia in the last several years, and also regarding the new position of the Armenian government regarding not only internal but also external policy of that South Caucasus Republic. Nikol Pashinyan, the Prime Minister of Armenia, proposed more than 2 years ago a new direction of Armenia's development, and he tries to shift the foreign policy from that pro-Russian direction for pro-European, pro-Western direction.
But what is bringing about
tensions between
sorry to interrupt you. I understand what you're saying, and thank you for that. But what is bringing about this shift in direction by Mr. Pashinyan? What's behind it?
I mean, the new the shift of foreign policy is the consequence of a second so-called Nagorno-Karabakh war, which was lost by Armenia, and also by the position of Russian Federation regarding the war. Not only the war, but also the situation after 2020, when Azerbaijan attacked in 2021 and 2022 the Euro territory of Armenia, and Armenia was not backed, was not helped by the CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization, which was created by the collapse of the Soviet Union, and this is kind of the NATO, but on the post-Soviet space, and where Armenia was, and Armenian society and Armenian government was absolutely angry because of that inaction of Russia. And it was the main reason for shifting the foreign policy. Armenia realized that the Russia is no longer the security guarantor of Armenia, and tried to find another international partners with whom it could cooperate and try to influence on its security.
Understood. So that's the thinking behind the shift towards the West, and I want to come to that in just a second. But it's not all Armenians that feel this way. We just had a report from our reporter on the ground in Armenia showing us that there were lots of people who supported the Russian presence and the Russian support of Yerevan. How widespread is the support for Pashinyan's shift towards the European Union within Armenia?
Of course, it doesn't mean that the whole Armenian society supports that new foreign policy. But according to the latest surveys, more than 50% of Armenian society supports the future EU integration of Armenia and support the peace process with Azerbaijan. Of course, there are some segments, parts of Armenian society which are dissatisfied with the Pashinyan's policy towards Nagorno-Karabakh, and that's why some opposition forces, pro-Russian opposition forces, are able to gain some public supports.
Okay, now Russia must be feeling quite frustrated at the moment. They try to influence the elections in Moldova, they try to influence the elections in Hungary, and both times their side failed to gain power. Do you expect a similar thing to happen in Armenia with the upcoming elections?
Yeah, there are some similarities between the case of Armenia and Moldova, and also Georgia, and we were able to observe in the last months a lot of elements of Russian disinformation and kind of hybrid attacks on that country. But the same like it was in the case of Moldova, the European Union decided to support Armenian governments in fighting with that disinformation. And we'll see what will be the results on the next Sunday, when we'll see the final outcome of the elections. But according to the current election surveys, it's highly probable that the ruling party, civil contract of Nikol Pashinyan's, will win the elections. But of course, the biggest question is the majority which that party will be able to gain, the regular or the constitutional one. And of course, I mean, it doesn't mean that there's no chance for the success of the opposition. Let me remind the situation from the previous year. Local elections in the second biggest city in Armenia, Gyumri, where officially the civil contract, the ruling party, ended on the first position, but the other political parties, opposition parties, were able to gain the majority and form the coalition in the city council.
Understood. So there's certainly some uncertainty around who actually holds the reins of power, even if Pashinyan's party wins a majority. I'd like now to move on to the relationship between the European Union and Armenia. What's in it for the EU to have Armenia in the bloc? What's the benefit?
Armenia is located on South Caucasus region, which is important for European Union as a transit corridor, especially nowadays when the so-called North Corridor going through Russia and Belarus is blocked because of the war in Ukraine and the Western sanctions imposed on Russia, and also because of the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz in the southern part of the globe. So the significance of so-called middle corridor through South Caucasus region is increasing. So that's why European Union is and will be interested in stabilization of the South Caucasus region. And of course, European Union, especially the Central Eastern members of that organizations, are interested in strengthening those countries which are located between them and the imperialistic Russia. So we are trying to support and generally the democracy in post-Soviet republics, but also that pro-European, pro-Western, pro-democratic forces in that countries.
Understood. Now, Russia, of course, as we've already said, is not particularly happy about this geopolitical shift from Armenia. But then, what about Azerbaijan and Turkey? I mean, they also have a stake in what happens in the region. What's their response like to this change in direction by Armenia?
Ankara and Baku, in my opinion, are interested in keeping Pashinyan in power because he is a guarantor of continuing of peace process with Azerbaijan and normalization of the relations with Turkey. And those countries are interested in opening the borders between their countries. Let me remind you that those borders were closed at the beginning of 90s. And of course, they're interested in boosting the trade between Central Asia, South Caucasus, and the European Union, and to get that expectations. I mean, the project of TRIP is essential. I mean, that so-called transport corridor, which will go through southern part of Armenia through Syunik region, and of course also the United States will be engaged in that project. So coming to the power of current pro-Russian opposition means creating kind of problems in that peace process with Armenia and the normalization process with Turkey. So that's why Baku and Ankara not directly but indirectly support staying Pashinyan in power.
Right. So very briefly, if you would, the relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan has been violent for many years now, on and off. How stable is their relationship likely to be going forward? Because you can have all the trade expectations you want, but if there's a war going on, nothing's going to happen.
It's difficult to predict for 100% how stable those relations will be in the upcoming months and years. But as I already mentioned, staying in power of Pashinyan and continuing the peace process, I mean, signing the peace treaty and opening the borders, give the huge chance of normalizing of those relations and creating the situation where the appearing the war between those countries will not take place.
Understood. Mr. Wojtasiewicz, thank you very much indeed for sharing your analysis with our audience, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.